He's also the webmaster, although he doesn't talk about that very much. His academic background is in electrical and computer engineering, but he's basically been doing software development, and he has very wide interests. And tonight he's going to talk about John Schroer.
Wow, it is really dark. Could you bring the lights a little bit? Is the camera on? I don't see a red light.
It's blinking.
Okay. So, I don't know how many people who are currently members of the club knew John Schroer. His health started to fail last year, but he passed away on July 14th, and he was such a large part of amateur astronomy in southeastern Michigan for so many years that it seemed essential to talk about him a bit. So, even if my VPN disagrees. So John Schroer had been into space exploration since childhood in the 1960s. His uncle worked for NASA during the days of Gemini and Apollo, and his father worked for the Apollo program as well. And it launched him on a lifelong set of hobbies and careers that touched all of us and all of our organizations in really significant ways. So he was a member of WASP for many years, but he was more heavily involved in the Ford Amateur Astronomy Club. He made sure to present observing notes for objects that could be seen in the sky for their meetings every month. We could probably, so yeah, I guess I should point out, see if I can go from here. Use your arrow.
Use the cursor.
Okay, there we go. So this is John. You'll see a lot more photos of him, but he was really interested in making sure that members of the Ford Club knew that they could go out and see things in the night sky, and I feel sometimes that we could do a better job in actually promoting observational astronomy at our meetings. So that's one of the lessons that I would like us to remember from him. Another thing that he organized for many years was their swap meet in March, which is a great way to get to know amateur astronomers from other clubs. We've gotten lots of members from that, and lots of WASP members who joined the Ford Club as a result of that. The number one thing that people think of when they think of John is astronomy at the beach. He was on the board for over 10 years, I think probably 12 or 13 years. Under his care, astronomy at the beach grew from an event that involved a few of the local clubs to a group that involved 9 local clubs. And we have this beautiful large pavilion that we didn't used to be able to afford, and until they tear down this building, we have that. So it's really a great place for clubs to talk to the general public that we usually don't get to see. It's a great place to do presentations with quality sound system, something that we work really hard on, and just a beautiful location to be. And it was through his work and John Lyons' work and Bob McFarland's work and Dave D'Onofrio's work over many years that the event is still going on. I think this is going to be its 19th year. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who have done most of the heavy lifting over that time, we've lost them. One of the founding members of the Astronomy at the Beach, Bob Fitzgerald, passed away just days before John Schroer did. And so there's a real void in the leadership of this event, which is really the standout event in our calendar for the year. So Diane is doing tremendous work on it, but we're down to about half the board that there used to be, and most of the heavy lifters are no longer, have retired from the group. So if you are interested in keeping this gem of an event alive. We really need your help. John had some really interesting ambitions for where GLAC generally and astronomy at the beach could go. He was really interested in, with the metro parks cutting back on funding and tearing down their pavilions, he wanted to talk about creating a space where we could actually have presentations for the general public without being attached to another organization. And our funding is currently a long ways away from actually owning a piece of property and taking care of such an institution, but it's definitely something I'd like to keep in the back of my mind for when one of us hits the lotto and wants to donate some money. He also wanted to expand the reach of local astronomy clubs to the world at large. So I'll talk about some other things that he did in a bit, but he really wanted to provide internet live streaming of the events at Kensington. If you've been to Kensington, you know that the cell coverage is awful and there's no free Wi-Fi. He had plans to work with his ham radio friends on providing that in some manner, and I don't think we'll ever see that happen. But. So the planning side, he did a lot of work, but the day of the event, he was usually, pretty much always, the actual announcer of events that were coming up, with his megaphone and in later years the sound system that he helped organize. He did sky tours on the beach and with a green laser pointer, and generally worked as hard as anybody else at the event for both of the nights that it was underway each year. A lot of us got to know him a lot better at the various star parties that are held around Michigan, at the Great Lakes Stargaze, at a private WASP member star party, and at other events. So we had a lot of dinners out. This is at Herman's European Cafe in Cadillac. This was at the place that, the funny place that we stayed with the broken couch, which is why I'm falling over, at the Great Lakes Stargaze, and this is him at the field at the Great Lakes Stargaze. Most of these photos, by the way, come from John Blum's website. So, and this is him with John and Steve Harvath, who's a member of both clubs, and I'm blanking on his name.
Dennis Salliott.
Dennis Salliott. And here's John kind of photobombing the group photo. And this was at the Remedy restaurant, which has been lost to a fire. But John Root, Therese Oldani, a bunch of some kids from the Henry Ford Community College Astronomy Club, and a bunch of Ford Club members. So he tended to be at the center of where all the different groups got together. Professionally speaking, he was involved in planetaria throughout the Midwest. He started at the Cincinnati Planetarium as a volunteer in 1986 for Halley's Comet. Began to do more and more work with them. Actually developed a planetarium show for the 20th anniversary of the Apollo 11 landing, and joined the paid staff in 1988. He moved on to the Boonshoff Museum in Dayton, Ohio, then the Schenectady Museum in upstate New York, and finally, for many years, he was the director of planetarium education at the Detroit Science Center, and the new Detroit Science Center, and the Michigan Science Center. He played a key role in keeping their astronomy programs going throughout all of those transitions, and between all the different administrations that could have easily ended some of the cool stuff that they were doing. Most recently at the new Detroit Science Center, he developed with the pretty notable astronomer Phil Plait the Bad Astronomy planetarium show that actually went nationwide. He was also the director of he was the president of the Great Lakes Planetarium Association and there's a group called the Astronomy Foundation that promotes amateur astronomy and astronomical sciences generally, and he was a committee chair in planetariums for them. He wasn't just a Midwesterner, he actually was helped the H. Lavity Stout Community College for the British Virgin Islands with the operation of this observatory here, and actually managed to go out there 3 times and help educate the local educators in how to run their observatory. And so most of us haven't actually gotten to go to the British Virgin Islands or the Caribbean to do astronomy. So. And more recently, he has worked with Marty Coons on Astronomy FM, doing worldwide online astronomy radio on Friday nights. Marty still has his show. Marty and Diane do a show on Wednesday nights as well. In addition to that, he worked with Steve Whitty and a group of other people from Greg Kneckley and from the Fort Amateur Astronomy Club on a local cable access astronomy show called Astronomy for Everyone. They're working on expanding that to the internet and bringing that worldwide, but unfortunately John wasn't around to see that. He loved space exploration generally, was heavily involved in the NASA JPL Solar System Ambassador Program, as several of our members have been. And beyond that, he was really into music, and when I helped him move out of his apartment last year, we went through lots of really cool LPs and 8-tracks and CDs and pretty much any format imaginable, and reel-to-reel tapes of planetarium soundtracks that he had done with musicians for the shows that he put on going back to the 80s. So if anybody has, he asked me to take care of the reel-to-reel tapes and see if I could transfer them. So if anybody has a reel-to-reel, an 8-inch gas cam, let me know. And ham radio was his other major passion. A lot of us knew him by his call sign K8RGH, which I think he had on his license plate, and it was his email address and many other things. So that was sort of my summary of him, but I don't know if anybody else wanted to share their memories of him.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I have never met a more amiable man. I've met a lot of amiable people, and he was up at the top. I never heard him say a hard thing about anybody, and it would be inconceivable that he would do so.
I know he and Dave D'Onofrio had significant political, philosophical, religious, and every other difference, and the two of them were practically best friends and could argue for many hours at a time without actually getting angry. That was always an amusing thing to see. Yes, Jim?
About 5 or 6 years ago, John was out at Texas Star Party with Dave also, and the dinner tables out there were filled with discussions, and there was a number of really interesting interplays of ideas and stuff between John.
Well, I can do that too, but not amiable.
No, there will be blood when Gary gets involved. Yes, Mr. Lyons.
Yeah, I've known John for a lot of years, and like all the pictures that you had up there, you see me with a smile on his face, and I don't know if I ever saw that man without a smile on his face, even when he's going through some of his recent health issues. He still had a smile on his face, and he was, I don't know if you could hope to meet a nicer guy than he was. And he was just like an endless supply of ideas on things to do. And he would just go out of his way to help you in whatever manner, didn't matter what.
Yeah,
So he's going to be missed.
extraordinary acumen for astronomy itself. I mean, the guy really knew. You could discuss almost any topic with him, and he was right up to date. He just noted all the time, and it was fascinating. You could mention any subject, and he heard about part of it, and started to elaborate on it.
And he probably knew several of the key figures as well. One thing that always amused me about John, especially when he was around Ken, was that they were the two most app-hungry mobile device users I've ever known. And so John had a soundboard of every sound effect you could imagine. So whether it was Looney Tunes or horror movies or whatever, he would have the right or wrong sound for that particular moment. And then Ken would have something else. And sometimes I wanted to get out of the war zone, but it was pretty compelling at times. Yes, sir, John.
Well, it wasn't very many years ago that I was brand new to the astronomy hobby, and I was very fortunate to meet John and get to ride with him to the Great Lakes Stargaze several years in a row. We rode together in that car that you see behind the group, and we roomed together. And as somebody new in the field, you can imagine how great it was to have somebody who worked in a planetarium out there with me, teaching me. He was always had endless time to spend helping everybody learn everything we needed to know.
Question. Here, here.
Nobody else has anything to say, I guess, or
Let's give the.
that's it for now. That's a slide. So that concludes the first half of our meeting. We're going to have our